Bismillah walhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. And just as a closing point, inshallah ta'ala, in relation to the emancipation and salvation from the fire that the hadith indicates, is a reminder, barakallahu fikum, connected to the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, where He mentioned the issue of being saved from the fire, the people living their lives, and how they were connected to this worldly life and unconnected to the hereafter. He mentions subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَا تَجِدَنَّهُمْ أَحْرَصَ النَّاسِ عَلَى حَيَاةٍ. You'll find the Yahud specifically, and the Mushrikeen by extension, that they were the most severe in their desire to live in this worldly life, and the most eager to obtain long lives. And he mentioned subhanahu wa ta'ala that they were the most severe in this regard. They were those who associate partners with Allah Azza wa Jal and the Yahud specifically. And then he mentions that they are individuals, يَوَدُّ أَحَدُهُمْ لَوْ يُعَمَّرْ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ, that an individual from amongst them would love and desire to live for 1,000 years. وَمَا هُوَ بِمُزَحْزِحِهِ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ أَنْ يُعَمَّرْ. And even that 1,000 years that they would long for and they would desire to have, it would not save them from the fire in the least. وَاللَّهُ بَصِيرٌ بِمَا يَعْمَلُونَ. Imam al-Sa'di, he commented upon this ayah, and if you think about this ayah in relation to that which we've covered from the fast and how it saves the person from the fire, he mentions rahimahullah ta'ala وَهُمْ أَحْرَصَ النَّاسِ عَلَى الْحَيَاةِ مِنْ كُلِّ أَحَدٍ مِنَ النَّاسِ. These individuals, the Mushrikeen and the Yahud specifically, are the most diligent of the people to live. حتى من المشركين الذين لا يؤمنون بأحد من الرسل والكتب. And specifically the Yahud, they were more severe in this desire to live, more so than the Mushrikeen who did not believe in anybody from the messengers or the divinely revealed books. And then he mentions ثم ذكر الشدة محبتهم للدنيا. He mentions the severe love they had, an intense love they had over this worldly life. يود أحدهم لو يعمر ألف سنة. That one from amongst them, he would love and desire to be from those that lived upon this worldly life for 1,000 years. And then he mentions something amazing. He says, وَهَذا أبلغ ما يكون من الحرص. This is actually from the highest level that you can have over just sheer and utter determination to live life. That they تمنوا حالة هي من المحالات. They loved, and if they could only obtain, and they longed for that which is from utter, something which is utterly impossible. And it's that they live for 1,000 years. And he says, and even if they were to live for those 1,000 years, لم يغني عنهم شيئا, they'll not be benefited by anything from that 1,000 years. ولا دفع عنهم من العذاب شيئا. Neither will that 1,000 years serve them in the least to push away any kind of punishment that they were duly deserving. Wallahu basirun bima ya'malun. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He's all aware and all acquainted and seeing of that which the people they do. And he mentions that this is tahdeed lahum. This is a type of threat and admonition for them. Ala mujawaza bi'a'malihim, that they go beyond bounds in their actions. And he reminded us subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that we mentioned before inside of these narrations is the reminder of our mortality and our return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, tabaraka wa ta'ala, connected to the salvation and emancipation from the fire, kullu nafs da'iqatul maut, that every single soul shall taste death. And then he mentioned subhanahu wa ta'ala this issue of being paid in full. Just like the month of Ramadan, its end is that we are paid in full. May Allah Azza wa Jalla allow us to enter the month of Ramadan and complete iman wa ihtisaba ya Rabb. He mentions tabaraka wa ta'ala, إِنَّمَا تُوَفُّونَ أُجُورَكُمْ, that indeed you shall be paid the full recompense of your actions, يوم القيامة, on the day of judgment. Then he mentions what is the true goal of every servant and every believer, every muwahhid, every Sunni. He said subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةِ فَقَدْ فَازَ. Whoever was granted salvation and emancipation from the fire and admitted into paradise, they are the people of utter success. Then he mentions subhanahu wa ta'ala, reminding us how deceptive this worldly life is. Jalla Jalalu, وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ. And the worldly life is nothing other than a temporary brief enjoyment that will come to an end. Imam al-Sa'di commented upon this verse in Surah Al Imran 185. He said, هذه آية كريمة فيها تزهيد في الدنيا بفنائها وعدم بقائها. Inside of this ayah is a recommendation for the people to leave off that which does not benefit them from the worldly life by being reminded of how quickly it will come to an end and how much of a lack of permanence it truly has. And he mentions وَأَنَّهَا مَتَاعٌ غُرُورٌ. It is a brief enjoyment that is deceptive in its nature. And actually, it's the case that the people they are deceived by its joys and temporary bliss and pleasures and trinkets and glitters. And he said, and they are deceived by that. And then he says, يعني تغر بمحاسنها. And that which it does have from goodness, it causes one to be deceived and to be taken away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, in the end result of all of that, ثم هي متنقلة. This worldly life, it only moves in stages, that you go from one stage to the next. He says, ومتنقل عنها إلى دار القرار. And the truth is that we are those that will be removed from this one state that we're in now in this worldly life, ultimately to the abode of the hereafter, which is the abode of permanence. And he said, and is that abode in the hereafter, التي توفى فيها النفوس ما عملت في هذه الدار. It is that abode of the hereafter, that the souls they shall be paid back in full in relation to that which they perform from actions inside of this worldly life. من خير وشر, whether it be from good or it be from evil. فمن زحزح, whomsoever he was saved from that fire. أي أخرج, he was removed from the fire, granted salvation from the fire, emancipation from the fire. زحزح عن النار وأدخل الجنة فقد فاز. He's saved from the fire, admitted into paradise. These are the successful, may Allah make us from them. He said, and what is intended by that? حصل له الفوز العظيم. He obtained the greatest of all happiness and joy and success. And that is the success and salvation the one has من عذاب الأليم, from the tormenting, painful punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. والوصول إلى جنات النعيم, and it is their arrival at the gardens of never-ending bliss. التي فيها ما لا عين رأت ولا أذن سمعت ولا خطر على قلب بشر. And it's those gardens of paradise that belong to Allah Azza wa Jal. Inside of them is that which no eye has ever seen, no ear has ever heard, and no soul can ever possibly imagine. And he says, and what is intended and understood from this ayah, that those that were saved from the fire of Allah Azza wa Jal and admitted into paradise, they obtained the ultimate success. So from them were those that were wretched. And not just that, they shall be wretched and cursed and have ultimate destruction and shaqa, that they will be from those that were deserving of the anger of Allah Azza wa Jal. And he said, abadi, they will not come to an end. And likewise, they were those that shall be faced with the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bil adhabi sarmadi, the perpetual punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they were deserving to earn. And he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, وفي هذه الآية إشارة لطيفة إلى نعيم البرزخ وعذابها. And inside of this verse, there is a subtle indication and a nod towards the mention of the joy and the bliss of the grave and that which it will contain, and the potentiality of the punishment that there will be inside of the fire. وأن العاملين يجيزون فيه بعد الجزاء مما عملوا. And it's the fact that those who worked those actions and those deeds, good or bad, will be rewarded in relation to their actions, good or bad. ويقدم لهم أموذج مما أسلفوا. And they shall be granted inside of the barzakh a small example of what is to come in relation to that which they have performed from their actions. And then he says, Allah Ta'ala musta'an. So when he mentions وَإِنَّمَا توفون, that rather you shall be granted in full ujurakum, your reward and your recompense on the day of judgment. And he says, and what's intended by that, توفيت أعمال التامة, that the actions have ceased and come to an utter end. There's nothing more that you can physically do. وإنما يكون يوم القيامة, rather what they're in now, it is the day of judgment and the day of standing. وأما ما دون ذلك فيكون في البرزخ. And as for that which is less than that and before it, then is that which they shall live inside of the world of the barzakh, the grave. بل قد تكون يعني قبل ذلك في الدنيا. And perhaps any something from punishment or from joy and bliss will touch them inside of this worldly life, like he said subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَا يُذِيقَنَّهُم مِّنْ عَذَابِ الْأَدْنَى دُونَ عَذَابِ الْأَكْبَرِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ, that they will be touched with a punishment before the major punishment on that day, yani in order that they may be from those that shall return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to end and to conclude, subhanahu Allah Azza wa Jal, he mentioned in Surah Al-Haqqa, كُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا هَنِيئًا بِمَا أَسْلَفْتُمْ فِي الْأَيَّامِ الْخَالِيَةِ. He says subhanahu wa ta'ala, commanding the people of paradise, eat and drink from that which you have been granted, hani'an, in joy and bliss, and you're welcome to do so. And he mentions why. بِمَا أَسْلَفْتُمْ, in that which, in relation to that which you used to do in the days that had gone by, in the days of old. And Ibn Abbas, he would say, and it was intended by that was the days of fast, the days of hunger, and the days of thirst. That they were hungry for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, and thirst for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, that He will grant them food and drink that day as a reward of what they sacrificed. And because of that, they were saved بإذنه سبحانه وتعالى and Mawla, and from the fire. هذا والله تعالى أعلم وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.